All right. And now we welcome on Amanda Vestri, just a couple days removed from her half marathon debut in 68:12. How's the body feeling, Amanda? I mean, like it's your first ever foray up to the half marathon distance.
Yeah, actually, the body's feeling really good. If you had asked me that on Sunday or Monday, I would have told you I was feeling awful. But thankfully, like 4 days removed, my legs are underneath me again, and I'm feeling pretty normal. So, yeah, not feeling too bad.
So I want to kick this off by just reflecting on 2024 as a whole. This has been just sort of incredible year for you. It's funny because I was looking at like how you opened up the year. You were still running 3K, 5K on the track
Hmm.
indoors, but then once you did start to step it up, now we've seen personal bests in the 5K. You got down to 31:10 in the 10K on the track, finished fifth at the trials, signed the pro contract with Brooks while you were in Eugene, and now you've got this half marathon that you crushed in your debut. When you take a step back to review the whole year, like what are the overall feelings about just how that success just kind of stockpiled upon itself?
Yeah, I think when I first came to Zap Endurance in the fall of 2023, we just kind of wrote out a bunch of really lofty goals and a lot of time goals. I just wanted to PR at every distance, to be honest, and just kind of establish myself as a first year pro. Um, and part of the interruption that happened with not making the World Cross trials because of an injury kind of just like motivated me to have a really strong spring. Um, and so then going into the 2024 season, I was just really, really focused on making the most of, January, February, March, April, May. And I think we really did that. I just kind of grinded the whole way and trained really, really hard. And that resulted in what I feel was the New York Mini 10K was probably the first time where I was like, wow, 31:10 or sorry, 31:17 on the roads. I was really feeling good about that. And I thought that would give me a lot of momentum into the Olympic trials on the track. But yeah, I mean, the trials didn't go the way that I had hoped. But I think overall, like you said, 2023 to 2024 was just a really, really good first year as a pro. And that kind of all culminated with the Brooks contract. And I was so, so grateful to be sponsored by Brooks. And it was a really unique way that it happened right before the Olympic trials. But I think that's sometimes how those things work. But yeah, it's been a really good first year. And the half marathon was always on the radar, but doing it at the Orlando half was never even on the calendar at all. Like I said, I was supposed to run at Valencia in the half marathon, and when that didn't work out, we thought that Houston was going to be our next half marathon attempt, but I kind of brought it up to my coach and my agent and was like, "Hey, I just kind of want to do this race, not for like, any crazy time or anything. Like, I just want to see what a half feels like." And they were like, "All right, like, go ahead, do it." And so that's kind of how the half happened. But yeah, that was really not on the calendar at all. So I'm really glad I did it though.
We'll get into more specifics on the half in just a bit, but in
Mhm.
looking at just how the training has changed, I guess from 2023 to 2024, what's been done differently? Is it more volume? Like, how are the workouts structured? Because it hasn't been perfect either. I mean, right? You said like there were hiccups before, US cross and then this past fall. So what are you learning works for you?
Yeah, I definitely was transitioning when 2024, the new year came around. I started transitioning into quite high mileage, and I find that I function really well off of high mileage, as long as I'm careful and I don't overdo it. But I think that would probably be the number one difference in terms of my training is the consistently high volume. Um, and
How high are we talking with the
well,
mileage?
so if I look at my log going back to leading up into like the New York Mini, um, and then leading up to the US 10K championships this past September, I was hitting, 105. I would hit like 110 miles. So like that maybe not super high to a marathoner, but for me, getting consistently over like 90s to like 100 was pretty high compared to what I was used to in college. Um, Now, obviously, like just coming back into running again, I've only hit like 2 90-mile weeks, so not that's pretty comfortable at this point for me. Um, but yeah, I was getting up there in mileage for sure, and I was doing a lot of my training with my teammate Ryan Ford, who's also he's a well, not also because I'm not a marathoner, but he's a marathoner, and so we would do a lot of our easy runs together, and yeah, we were just like the whole spring, this last spring, we were just like getting really high mileage. So I really enjoy it. Maybe not to the extent of getting to like the 120s or 130s. Maybe that's for marathoning, but um, yeah, I find a lot of value in it. And I think it really helps callus your body for the longer races. And I think I train very similarly to like a half marathon or maybe a little bit longer, but it really bodes well for the 10K distance too, I think.
With Ryan Ford, I like to his Chicago was pretty good, right? That he put together in his debut, and I think it was on our previous show right before, and I like gave like a last second sort of shout out, being like, watch out for this guy because like he held together. I guess it was Clayton Connor's pacing, I think the year before, and if he can
Yeah.
just close it out, then he's due for a good day, and it was a pretty good day. So, what is the group dynamic right now with Zap? I know for this half marathon, it was a little bit of a unique sort of setup where you spent some time in Florida, but
Yeah.
how's the group looking?
The group is looking good. I'm sure you know Andrew Colley. He just won Manchester. So he's kind of hitting on all cylinders right now, and he's someone who's been through the ringer in terms of injuries
So
and
many injuries.
so many injuries, and he's just never got a break. And I think this year he's really establishing himself. And you got to give the guy credit for putting himself out there, even at the US Olympic Marathon trials. I was watching him that whole race, and had it not been for his fueling kind of messing with his stomach, I think he was a contender in that race for sure. And I just love the grittiness that he shows. And yeah, and Ryan Ford also, he debuted in New York, and
Oh, that's what it was. It was New
I
York,
think
not Chicago.
after
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, but he did pace Connor or he paced, sorry, not Connor, Clayton in Chicago last year. And I think that gave him the marathon bug, like, wow, this is pretty cool. So Ryan's really, really motivated, and he's looking to make teams, he's looking to run fast in the marathon. And Josh Ozuski, he's another one. He finished eighth at the US Olympic Marathon trials, and he's another one who's been battling injury. And that guy was in really good shape before New York, but his hips started hurting him a few days before, as unfortunately happens a lot of times in a marathon build. And um, he just kind of like scraped it together, but he wasn't feeling great on the day. But yeah, everyone's just kind of like head down working hard, and I think the team dynamic's pretty good right now, and we're all really excited for 2025.
When we look at just sort of like the goal setting, you did say like, all right, a year ago you sat down and wrote out some goals. What were they?
Yeah. My honestly, I could probably pull them up, but a lot of them were my coach kind of would like laugh because I'd say things like, I want to run under 31:45. And he'd be like, you're gonna run faster than 31:45. Or I'd say, I want to run under 15:20. And he'd be like, dude, You got to set your goals. You don't want to be unrealistic, but you really got to set them, like set the bar high so that if miss by a little bit, you're still working toward something even greater. And I think one of the goals that I didn't have on the sheet that I went over with my coach that he told me to put down kind of was making the Olympic team in the 10,000 meters on the track. I kind of like laughed at him when he said, yeah, that should be a goal of yours because at that point I hadn't run, 31:10 yet or 31:17 on the roads, but the closer I got to that Olympic trials, the more of a goal it was to like make my first Olympic team. Um, I did get COVID a few weeks before, so I was holding on by a thread before that race, but um, now the goals are, changing a little bit, but still just like making teams. Um, and I have a few time goals still, but yeah, I think everything year after year is the same. It's just leveling up those goals. So,
As we kind of like progress through this season, and I remember seeing you at the mini 10K, and we were both talking about just like, have you done like the numbers crunching on how it is like you have to get to the Olympics, like what time you have to
Mhm.
run and how fast the race has to be and points and all that kind of stuff. And it feels like we're also headed into a pretty similar situation heading into 2025 because they've made the standard 30-20, I think it is now.
Yeah, I saw that.
And there's only so many opportunities to run a fast uh, 10K on the track.
Hmm.
You have already kind of shared that there was this half marathon. The plan is Houston, and then from there, potentially try and go for the road running team,
Hmm.
which means you'd have to run at the Publix Atlanta half marathon, and then soon after that would probably be the 10. Is that also something that you're looking at to chase that
Yep.
standard?
Yeah, so the in an ideal world, right, the plan is, you know, team making teams are important, obviously, and so the half marathon team is on my radar. Um, so that March 2nd race, I'll definitely be shooting to make the team. Unfortunately, I've heard that my Orlando half doesn't count toward a world ranking.
How absurd is that? I know because now
Yeah,
Emma Grace Hurley, I think, has the same problem because it was at a
yeah,
smaller race that wasn't on the World Athletics calendar, and
yes,
it's
yeah.
crazy. I think this is a huge mistake by World Athletics where like that doesn't show up as like your personal best on your
Yeah.
profile.
I saw that. I
Uh,
was looking at that this morning. I'm like, oh, I wonder where I'm ranked now. And I looked and I was like, why is my ranking not on there? But I noticed Emma because I know Emma just ran a few weeks ago and she ran really, really well for her debut. And I was like, hers isn't on there either.
yeah, it's a
So
problem because then like
yeah. So now we don't count. We like even if we like if she were to run Houston, if I were to run Houston, though that's not going to help, I don't think, for
well, so I
any
think
rank.
Houston probably, if you run fast enough, that's probably, I think that's definitely like on the calendar.
Is
So you'll
it?
definitely get points for, I think, I would
Yeah.
assume, and with a race like that that attracts like so much top talent,
Yeah.
that you'll be fine for the World Championship qualifying as long as you just run well in Houston
Right.
and then at the half marathon champs. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like it's a massive miss to just like like World Athletics pretend that this race doesn't
I was
exist.
bummed about that. My brother's the one that told me actually. We were having dinner the other night and he was like, "Yeah, Amanda, some guy was on, Twitter saying that your thing is not going to count." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so he found out and I was really bummed, but I mean, I didn't do it for that reason, but I thought, "Oh, this is nice. It'll count toward a world ranking and I know you need to get like two in to have that count." But that's all right. Things happen. But yeah, to your original question, the plan will then be to focus on the track pretty heavily. Um, and the initial plan was to go back to London for the night of 10K
And then they
PBs,
did
but
away
they're
with
not
that
doing it.
race.
Yeah, they're not doing it this year, and I was really bummed about that. But probably go to California and run at the Sound meet. I think it's late March, so it'll be close, but I think half marathon and 10K training are pretty interchangeable for me, so I think it'll be good.
How have you grown as a 10K runner? Because I go back and look at sort of like your stats from like 2023 when you
Yeah.
were running it on the NCAA circuit, and then you
Hmm.
take, I believe it was eighth at the U.S. Championships. You showed up to the U.S. Championships in a similar situation to like how Parker Valby was this year, just sort of running the most 10Ks of probably anyone in that field,
Hmm.
and you still put together a really good performance. So, how has the 10K grown on you?
The 10K is probably my favorite event of all time. I just love it. I love the
You're
outdoor.
one of the few people in the world who probably who says that.
Yeah. I really enjoy it, but I think I need to work on my tactical racing abilities in the 10K because that's never been my strong suit. I'm the type of person where I kind of like a 10K time trial on the track, and I think that's when I race my best. Like as you saw in London, that was basically just like put the pace lights on and just go. And I tend to do really well in that environment, but I'd like to work on starting a little bit slower in the beginning and kind of finding the art of closing in a 10K. So I definitely have not mastered it, or I would say found my full potential in that event yet. But in terms of the sheer just like the work that it takes to be good at a fast 10K, I think I'm good at that. But yeah, definitely can work on some race tactics in that in the championship environment.
Because in 2023, you were seventh at NCAAs, right? I think
Yeah,
this is like
I
sixth or seventh.
I was like sixth or seventh. I don't, yeah, I think I might have been seventh because I was sixth indoors for the five. And I think I must have been, I think I was a spot lower. Yeah, maybe. I don't really remember though.
It puts you in a very interesting spot at that point in your career because, again, like 10K specialists aren't like the people who are getting all of these contract offers. Like it's
Yeah,
either looked at like, wait, so are you still good at the 5K and
right.
you can do the 10K, or are you moving up, to the roads and then,
Hmm.
half and then eventually full, which, yeah, I mean, that's a tough spot. How did you navigate those first couple months of, you
Hmm.
know, feeling like you still had unfinished business in the sport? You wanted to pursue this professionally, but again, like the shoe companies aren't calling right away.
Yeah. So I think the one thing I talked about with my coach, Pete Ray, that was really important to me was I wanted to eventually focus more on the roads and transition to that because, that's to be honest, that's where the money is. And I think no one would disagree with that. But also, I had expressed to him that it was really important for me, for my foundation as an athlete, to still build on anywhere from the 3K all the way up to the 10K before I really like transition to anything permanently. Because I think being a better 3K runner makes you a better 5K runner, which makes you a better 10K runner, and then so on and so forth. And so for me, like, even though I would never call myself a 3K runner, I will still likely run a 3K at some point over the next year, and try to, get get that better. And I'll try to go under 15 in the 5K. So I still really care about the track and I want to be a well-rounded athlete because I think those are the best athletes at all distances. I think you need to have that type of speed to be competitive on a global level in the half marathon or in the marathon, and things like that. But yeah, so my coach was in 100% agreement. Like he he was like, our intentions aren't to just like push you to the half or the full marathon exclusively. That will come kind of as you progress. And I'm still relatively young. I'm 25 and I just made my half marathon debut. So I have not been pushed into anything by any means. But um, Brooks is the kind of sponsor where they basically just said, you go do your thing and like we'll support you. And they were never kind of pushing me one way or another. But I do think it helps when the brands kind of know that your intention is to go longer. because the ultimate goal will definitely be like the full marathon, but it's really important to me to have PRs across the board, for as long as I can anyways. So
You were good in high school. Shout out to like coming up in like one of the most competitive New
yeah,
York high school eras. Where did it all begin for you to like? I know it probably was very fulfilling to put pen to paper on the Brooks contract, and even when you
yeah.
went with Zap, but there's not a ton of people who are out there being like, "Oh, when I grow up, I want to be a professional runner." But that
Mhm.
was you, I guess. What fueled that at the beginning?
Yeah, so honestly, my older brother, he's a couple years older than me. He got into running in, I don't know, probably like freshman year of high school. And so I started running after he started running, and it kind of just turned into like, I don't know, I really fell in love with the sport, and I honestly was just pretty good at it from an early age. So that, it's kind of a little bit easier when you're a kid and you're good at something. You're like, oh, I want to do this. But yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it, and I was very serious about it all throughout high school. Maybe a little bit too serious at times, but I think the
What does that
one
look like when you say like, oh, I was so serious.
yeah. I will like, I would be
You were
I
pushing
would
the pace.
sometimes skip like social events because I'd be like, well, I have states in 2 days, I have the state meet or whatever. And I'd be like, well, I can't go on the senior trip because I have a race next week. So, sometimes I wish I didn't do those things because you're so young at that point that it doesn't really matter. But I remember my senior year, my only goal was to make the NXN team because I was like, I really want that gear and I really want to go. And New York at the time was really deep. You had Caitlin Tui, you had Kelsey Camille, you had um, Jessica Lawson. You had like all these good girls that you had to kind of contend with. So I just wanted to be, up there and kind of like assert my presence a little bit. And the ultimate goal in high school was to like go to a college for running. I always joke that I majored in running, even though I actually have a degree in exercise science. So I did get a degree, but I was just really focused on running, and I just wanted a pro contract right out of college. But getting a pro contract out of college is very hard. And, um, it's Zap was I obviously super grateful to them for allowing me to be part of their team. And that's just a really amazing opportunity to have. But yeah, I just know that it's a rare opportunity to be able to be supported by a brand, and I'm really grateful that I was able to be supported by Brooks. So
Your
yeah,
college career is also just pretty interesting because it starts off at Iowa State,
yeah.
a couple coaching changes, then
Hmm.
you transfer to Syracuse. What was sort of the biggest takeaway you have from handling all of that in the time where you're developing as a runner?
Yeah. So yeah, Andrea McDonough, she was my first college coach. Absolutely loved her. And then she left, and Amy Rudolph was my coach my sophomore year, and she was amazing. She's such an amazing woman. And those two made a huge impact on me, in a positive way. And honestly, the reason for the change to Syracuse, I think, was I was super young still when I got to college, and I wasn't, I think, mature enough to handle being away from home. And so I was pretty homesick, as a lot of kids get. And I just felt like I needed a change. Um, I wanted to be a little bit closer to family. So I visited Syracuse again, and I really enjoyed my visit there. And me and Coach Bell, we clicked immediately. So he was my coach for 4 years because I was in college for 6 for the COVID year, and then I got injured for 1 year. But yeah, Coach Bell we worked really, really well together. I still am in frequent communication with him. But it just kind of all clicked with him. And obviously there were a few hiccups along the way, a few injuries, but I think overall, he kind of sparked my interest in the longer distances too, because he is very he thinks the long run's very important, which I do as well. And so a lot of long runs that I would do were pretty fast. And he was like, you could be really good at the marathon one day. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, I'm good at the long runs, but these long runs are like, 13 miles. They're not super long. But yeah, he kind of like sparked that little thought in my head that, oh, maybe I could be good at the longer stuff. And yeah, we just kind of worked really well together. And I came back for a sixth year because I got injured my fifth year. And I got injured right before the cross country national race, which was so sad because I really thought I could do really well there. But I came back for indoor and outdoor, and those were my two first team All-American performances. So I'm really glad I came back. And I thought that'd be enough for a pro contract, but obviously it was not enough for the big brands. But yeah, I think Coach Bell's kind of theory, or his theory of coaching was for the long term instead of the short term. So let's not make you as good as you can possibly be right now. Let's make you good enough so that you can like continue your career long term. And yeah, that was kind of his approach. And a lot of CUSE alum are doing really good right now. So in the long distance avenues. So yeah, it's super cool to see.
So you have the assurance and long-term vision from,
Yeah.
Coach Bell. You've got obviously the passion and drive that's been with you since high school.
Mhm.
Is there a performance that sticks out to you from the Syracuse college days that you're like, okay, this is the one that 100% gave me the confidence that I could do this at the next level?
I think the one race that comes to mind was when uh, I did the Stanford 10K in outdoor track. That's one of them where I ran 32:08, and I thought I could have, well, I know I could have run faster, but my hamstring like tightened up on me in the race, and I was like almost gonna drop out because I was, I felt it pulling, but I was like, this is the only opportunity I have right now to get the regional qualifier. So that was a kind of eye-opening race where I felt, wow, like if I can run 32:08 with this thing tightening up on me and potentially could have been a sub 32 race. That was the race that Emily Venters ran super amazing. She ran like 31:40 something, and it was crazy. She ran so well. So that race, and then my regional cross country performance in 2022 or 2021 maybe. I ran at the Franklin Park
Mm.
course, and it was just a really good race, and I just pretty much obliterated that race. So that was another one where I was like, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. And hopefully I can kind of take it to the next level and perform well at the NCAA meets. Um, but yeah, I don't think I ever had one race where I was like, oh, now I've made it, Like I never had like a runner-up finish at the NCAA meet or an NCAA title or anything, but it's really hard to do that and it's very rare to do. So
I mean, do you enjoy going into some of these races with a little bit of that underdog
yeah.
label or just like that chip on your shoulder? Because it was,
Yeah.
even though you ran really fast in the season leading up to the trials, I feel
Yeah.
like, again, like it was another case where sort of like you were looked at as just sort of like, and a contender. Like
Yeah.
there's the favorites, and then you would be like in the contender bucket.
Yeah, it's funny because I was having this conversation with Annie Frisbee and Dakota Lindworm the night before the New York Mini 10K. Oh, and Dakota Popane now. But her now husband, Montana, he was there too. But we were all having dinner together, and I was just telling Dakota and Annie in Montana, I was like, I feel really like no one knows me at all. And I was like, I kind of like that because you go in with people having zero expectations of you. So it's kind of one of those things where you're like, well, I have nothing to lose because no one expects me to do well here. People are looking at, the Olympians in the field and the US, half marathon or marathon record holder or former record holder, which like rightfully so, right? If you haven't really made a name for yourself, no one's gonna know your name. So I think that was the race where my underdog mentality really helped me because really no one thought that I would be the first American in that race. Um, but I thought that I was going to be the first American in that race. So it's just kind of one of those things where, kind of like Dakota said, like before the Olympic trials, like people may have not been talking about her, but going in with the underdog mentality kind of allows you to go into a race more freely. So,
Yeah. And it just feels like you're sitting on a secret and it's like, all
yeah,
right, everyone else is
like,
gonna find out soon.
wait to see this. Yeah.
So then after the mini 10K and in the build up to the trials, you mentioned you caught COVID.
Yeah.
How do you not allow that to just derail things and just like hit the
Yeah.
panic button? Like, how'd you handle that?
Well, my coaches were, um, they were kind of like, you know, you're fine. Like we're good, you know, and we were responsible about it. We, I wasn't like out with anyone or anything like that. But during the workouts, I could just feel like I couldn't walk down the street without just like everything dripping down. Like I had
Oh,
like so much drainage. I was couldn't smell or taste anything. I just felt very weak. I had no appetite at all. So that was another big thing is like I'm usually a really good, I fuel really well. And I think it's so important to fuel your body well for especially running as high of mileage as I was running. But I had no appetite. I couldn't eat. And um, I did the one last workout leading into the Olympic trials, 10K. Um, and I just really pushed it hard. And I think I took every last bit of energy out of me in that workout. There's something to be said for like saving it a little bit for the race. And I think I just overdid it and coupling that with like being sick. It was just not a good window. And I kind of knew I was getting sick at the airport leaving the mini 10K. I was like, I feel a little bit sick right now. And then it kind of all hit me. And yeah, I was like, just like, it is what it is. I can't change it. And I'm not going to not race the Olympic trials. I remember telling um, Tristan Colley now. I was like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Like I'm not gonna drop out of the Olympic trials because I'm sick. Um, but things happen, right? And like the timing just wasn't meant to be. But I guess the lesson can be that, maybe less is more in training because maybe I was just really highly, trained and a little bit fatigued and my immune system was probably compromised from that. So yeah.
so then to put you back in Eugene, not to like
Yeah, no,
resurrect any
it's
bad memories
fine.
or anything.
Yeah.
The morning of that race, how do you mentally get yourself up to be like, all right, this is it.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do this.
There was like a lot going on at that time with Brooks being in negotiations with my agent. So honestly, I was a little bit distracted, and I think that's something that I could have been a lot better at, but it was just really overwhelming because a lot of times, like, they want people, the brands want you in uniform for a big race. So honestly, I was just really distracted that day, which I don't know if that was beneficial or detrimental to my performance, but
I
um,
remember in the mix zone afterwards, like we were
yeah,
asking, I know at that point, like it's a funny interview to kind of like go
yeah,
back and,
I
and
know it's
watch
funny.
because like you're just toast from
Yeah,
the exhaustion, but then
yeah,
also emotionally processing results all in real time. But then at the same time, it's just sort of like the funny bits of like, so when did you sign this contract? It was like a couple hours before the
yeah,
race. When did you get the spikes? And it's like a couple hours before the race, and it's like that was
yeah.
your first ever, I think, run in them.
Yeah, it was my
So
first. I
risky.
didn't even have the Brooks train. I didn't even have, the trainers with me because they were like, we got to get you like your uniform and your spikes. Like that's it. Um, so yeah, it was crazy. And like Jess McLean walked up to me. She's like, "Oh my God, you're with Brooks now. That's amazing." And I saw Erica and I was like, "Oh my gosh, guys, like we're all teammates now." So it was really cool in that way, but definitely a little bit scary to just be like, okay, I've never worn your spikes before. I've never worn your shoes before, but um I was like, it's a uniform and it's spikes, you know? Like
Yeah.
it'll be fine. But it's just funny looking back on it now because I just think I put so much pressure on myself to make the team that I think it actually ended up hurting me a little bit. And I think if I would have just kind of went in with the underdog mentality that I typically had gone in that season, that maybe things would have been better. But I also don't think like being sick just did not help anything. I just didn't feel like myself. Like um, at any point in the race, did it feel easy? It felt hard the whole way. Um, so I think that was the biggest thing. But I weirdly enough though, I was still pretty pumped afterwards just to be like, ah, I'm with Brooks now. Like I'm excited to, start this new journey with them. And I remember I told you like, yeah, that was it. That was the last race of the season. And then I went and ran the 6K champs, but that was more so because I was like, I've got to redeem myself. I've got to redeem myself from that horrible race. And I felt like I did a pretty good job there. And um yeah, I just wanted to show Brooks, like, hey guys, don't worry, I'm still good.
Yeah, it's so tough to mentally try and think of like, all right, for the next like 30 minutes, I just need to pretend everything in the world is okay
Yes.
and
Yeah.
according to plan. And it's just sort of like there's just so many outside factors trying to
Yeah.
like break up those thoughts. What do you
Yeah.
remember, I guess, about like the way the race played out and like if you let's play a hypothetical of like if you were healthy
Yeah.
and firing on all cylinders, how would you have approached sort of, the big breakaway and move that eventually the people who did make the team,
Hmm.
make like how would you have, reacted to that?
I think I could have definitely put up a fight a little bit more. And I might have even if I was feeling really good, my plan was to just kind of take the lead. Like I think Susanna Sullivan took the lead for quite a
Hmm.
while. But to be honest with you, I think on the day, if I wanted to make that team, I probably was going to have to take it from the gun and just like really go hard because that's just like that's how I race the 10K. That's how I'm best at it. And that's not great championship mentality. But the women in front of me on the day they were just so good over the last, I think, 6 or 7 laps or whatever it was, and I had no response. But yeah, if I felt better, I mean, who knows, maybe I could have gone with them. Um, I think in training, a lot of times the focus is just on how do we get really, really good and how are we able to run, 31 minutes or sub 31 minutes. But it's really hard to replicate being able to close really well,
Yeah.
even off of a slow pace. It doesn't make sense. And I always talk to my dad about this because he's like, but didn't you have so much energy? And I'm like, no, it like, even if you go out really slow for the first 5K, closing the last 5K is still hard because you're making that huge gear shift and you're using all these different energy systems. And I think someone like Carissa Schweitzer, like she's really good at the 1500 as well. And I'm sure Parker Valby could put up an amazing 1500 and she's run amazing in the 3K. And obviously Wayne Claudia is world-class talent. So it's just, I think I need to get better at the shorter distances, maybe. And I think that will help me be able to shift gears and not get as gassed at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think in a race like that, it's so tactical. And part of me was like, you suck. You should have just taken it. And I remember I was talking to I think I was talking to Emma Grace Hurley like months and months ago, and she was like, "Oh, I was really hoping you would just take it and go." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I should have," but it's intimidating to do something like that in the Olympic trials final. So
So you had that performance, 6K. At
yeah.
that point in the year, when do you start the thought about the Valencia half and like talking to coach about that?
Oh, we had known we were doing Valencia for quite some time. Probably, I want to say like before the 6K champs. Like we knew I was doing Valencia. We were kind of mapping out my fall. So Valencia was on the calendar for a very long time because I remember when I took my little bit of a break, I did like every other day short like 30-minute runs for a couple weeks. That was in July, and then I got right back into training for Valencia. And the Cow Harbor race, the 10K champs, that was always on the calendar too, just because it's the 10K USATF championship. But that was more of just like a going to be kind of a rust buster, I guess. Um, and yeah, and then shortly after that race, I got the injury, and Valencia was pretty much out of the question. I had also added the Boston 10K for women to the calendar, and I was really looking forward to running that. And that was my first scratch. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do that. Well, hopefully I can still do Valencia, but there was just not enough time to do it. I wasn't running, so I couldn't. Yeah.
Was the allure of Valencia just like, all right, everyone goes there and runs fast?
Yeah, I wanted to just run. Like, I was so delusional. I was like, I want to go run the American record. Like, I can do that. And obviously, like,
Wayne did it in her first half. Yeah.
yeah, but she's Wayne. So I was like, yeah, if I am delusional enough to think I can get the American record in the half, maybe I can still run sub 67:30. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe I could still run something really, really good. But I think the American record is like 66:20 or something. But I was like, anything can happen. Um, I feel like the half marathon is a sweet spot for me. So I don't think sub 67 is out of the question at some point. But Valencia, I knew would be like the place to run really fast. So I was really bummed, but yeah, poor timing
It's
again.
my favorite distance to race, but do you feel like the half marathon's having a little bit of a moment? It's like we've got,
Yeah,
Clayton and Connor going to Houston, possibly
yeah,
giving that American record a
yeah,
scare. The women's American record has like traded hands like 5 times in the last like
yeah,
3 or 4 years, but like
yeah.
it's about time I think that the half marathon gets a little bit of shine.
I think so too. I think it's an underrated distance. I myself was underrating it for sure. Like it deserves more respect because it's a hard distance to run really well at. And I by no means am a half marathon expert, but running that one in Orlando was like, oh, I actually really like this. Like this could be a contender with the 10K title in terms of how much I like it. So, and I kind of have the marathon bug a little bit too. So I'm like, dang, if I can run that, I think I can run faster in the half. And then I'm like, how does that translate to the marathon? I mean, I think Jackie Goggins is a really good example of, gosh, she could probably run a great half right now. And I think it translates really, really well to the full because obviously she closed in like 70.
Yeah,
And
it was
what can you
insane.
do in the half if you can close in a 70? That's crazy. That's really
Yeah,
impressive.
I saw that result and I was like, no way. And it was like just
Yeah.
holding 2:19 marathon pace for the last like 11
Yeah.
miles. I was like,
That's
geez.
wild. That's
Yeah,
wild.
it was
That's
crazy.
awesome. Yeah.
Um, so to continue on like sort of like this progression, after Valenti is out of the cards, what was the injury and like how did you
Yeah.
work your way back from that?
So I had the same injury that I got before World Cross Country Trials that were supposed to be in January, well, that they were in January, last year. And it's a like a piriformis issue where like basically what happened is I was doing a long run and it was, I don't know, 4 weeks out from Valencia or something. I was doing a long run and it was like super muddy and I slipped and I like felt something when I slipped and I was jumping over all these puddles and I finished the run and I was like, oh man, I did it again. And basically what happens is I like slightly pulled my piriformis muscle and that's a really bad muscle to aggravate. And essentially you just like can't run on it and it hurts really bad. It's the same thing that happened before cross country trials. Um, and so I couldn't run on it. And I just took some time off and I cross trained and Yeah, I started running in November, like November 3rd, I think was my first run back. So I was super bummed about it, but um, I don't think it's something that will affect me like long term. I don't think I'm injury prone. I just think like these freak accidents happen. It's like it couldn't really help that I slipped. And, when you're running super high mileage and if you're not super careful, anything can kind of throw your muscles off. And so, yeah, that unfortunately happened. But I mean, I'm in the weight room all the time. So it's not like I have like immense weaknesses or anything like that. So, yeah.
No one loves it, but how are you with cross training?
Yeah, I hate it. I don't like it at all. Like, I wish I could say that I love cross training, but I mean, I have preferred methods of cross training. Like I like the elliptigo, because it feels like you're kind of in that running routine or that running form. I'm not a big fan of the bike just because I don't like sitting when I'm working out. Like I like to be like standing. But I think there's something to be said for cross training, getting your heart rate up without the impact. And, the elliptical is great, or what Parker uses, the arc trainer, right? I
Yeah.
don't think I've used one of those, but that's probably really good to use if she uses it. So yeah, I mean, I don't love it, but I do like listening to music or watching YouTube videos while I'm on it. So I'm like, I don't really care if my screen time is high when I'm cross training. So
So then November 3rd, I think, or around then is when
yeah,
you got back to running. So
yeah,
really, I guess like this half marathon performance, how many workouts between in that span of time?
like none. Like I did two workouts maybe. I mean, I literally did, I'll give you an example. One of the workouts I did was 3 by like 1, 2, 3 minute fartlek with like half rest. That was my workout. And I was running probably like not nearly as fast as like of the pickups as I normally would because it was like my first one back. But yeah, I mean, I ran on the Alter G for probably a week or two, um, 5 days a week. And I was doing that at like, 85% body weight. And then just did regular runs. And I think I did two long runs before the half. One that week I did. Sunday I did an hour 45.
How
And
far does
then
that take you?
Saturday was the race. Typically, if I'm being honest, like in the lead up to Valencia, my long runs were more like 18, 19 miles at like 6:05, 6:10 pace. So they were pretty fast. But the hour 45 one was like not fast. It was like 6:30 pace. But that was because I was on like a trail and it was kind of hard to run fast there. But yeah, so I did like two long runs, two very, very moderate workouts. Nothing like when I was doing Valencia training, I was like hitting it hard, like well, like every week was there was like a main workout that we were trying to run really well, but it was just kind of funny because that's why I was like, if you look at the video of me crossing the line, I was like almost in tears because I like ran over to my dad and I was like, oh my God, Dad, did you see what I just did? Like, that's crazy. Because I thought a good day would be anything under 70. I was like going to be so excited about because I hadn't been training for, 3 or 4 weeks because I took off of running and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna after like maybe 5 days off of running, you could still maintain some level of fitness. But I was like, I've t taken off for quite a while now. I don't think I'm really in great shape right now. So it was just kind of funny at the time. I was like, that's really funny. I was close to 67, like sub 68. I was like, that's crazy. So
Did you have any concept of it was such a low key sort of race that was like on very few people's radar.
yeah,
Only reason I think I found out that you were doing it was because they tagged the elites in like some Instagram story and I just
yeah,
happened to be up on Sunday morning and I was like, oh, that's happening literally right
yeah,
now. And so then I tuned in and watched and it was just clear like you were all by yourself for
yeah,
most of that race with just sort of like the bike escort. There was
yeah.
cobblestones, I think, at one point.
Yeah, that was tough. That was tough.
What were you thinking, I guess, in terms of like were you looking down at your watch and realizing
Yeah.
like how fast you were going?
Yeah, the problem was my watch was a little bit out of sync with the actual course. So you know how your watch always says you're faster than you are. So technically my watch said I was running 5:09 pace the whole way, but we're not going to talk about that. But my watch was pretty far off. Like the first mile, according to the course, I went out in a 5:18, which is kind of like where I was comfortable at.
And
My
Katie
watch
Izzo was with you for a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Katie was with me for like a mile or two. And we went out like pretty comfortably. Um, but my watch was saying like 5:10, so I was like, I don't want to go out super fast right now. Like I kind of just wanted to get into a rhythm, and I thought like 5:20 would feel comfortable, but I every time I passed the mile marker in my head, I was like, well, like for the 2 mile mark, for example, it said 10:24. I'm like, okay, so I'm on 5:12 pace. And then I would be like, all right, so I need to be at, 15, what is it, 15:36 to be on 5:12 pace. So I kept doing the mental math in my head and I kept adding 5:12 to the next mile. So when I would come through 3 miles and I was at, 15:30 something, I was like, okay, I'm still on pace for a 5:12 average. And I don't know why 5:12 was in my head. I was just like that after I hit the second mile at 5:12 pace, I was like, I gotta keep that the whole time. So every mile I hit, I was by myself at this point, and I didn't trust my watch because I wanted to trust like the mile markers on the course. I just kept adding 5:12 and I was like, just keep hitting that, Amanda. And I was ahead of the 5:12 average for quite a while. And then I think I started falling off a little bit at like mile 10, but it was more so out of boredom than anything because I was just really, I like no one was with me, so and I didn't have any guys with me either, so I was just kind of like, I want this to be over with, and I'm kind of bored, but the bike escort guy was great, so it was a fun way to finish it off.
Yeah. So you cross the finish line, you run into your dad's arms. Like, how long does it take you to, I guess, like process, like,
Mhm.
all right, yeah, I ran 68:12.
Yeah,
What does this sort of mean if God willing, like the next month goes,
yeah.
according to plan, you stay healthy for Houston?
I haven't really processed what it means for Houston necessarily. Um, People were throwing numbers around like, oh, well, if you're going to Houston, like this would be what you would have run at Houston. I was like, okay, like we'll see. But I think it's just like good to know that that's my starting point. And now like we can build from there. And I talked to my coach, and he was basically just like, we don't need to be hitting home run workouts every week, just kind of like hitting singles and doubles along the way. And being with a pack of people in Houston is going to already allow you to run a little bit faster because you're not going to be wasting energy leading the whole way. And obviously, Houston's a very fast course. So I think that kind of plays well into what we're trying to do. Because ultimately, like, it for that Orlando race, that was just more about like getting my feet wet a little bit, seeing how the distance felt. And now that I know how it feels, I know that I can push harder and I'm not gonna like burn out. It's not a marathon where you like necessarily hit a wall. I just think like you have to refocus yourself at miles 9 and 10 to be like, all right, you need to rally now. But it didn't feel that long to me. So I think in Houston, it's going to be like I have, some time goals. Um, but yeah, I'm just gonna go probably really hard and just hope that whoever I'm with in the group also wants to go really hard and we can kind of work together to run a really fast time. So that's kind of the goal for Houston. So
I think on the Manchester broadcast, they said that Wayne might be doing it.
sure, yeah.
Does that kind of factor in a little bit? Like, would you try and
Yeah.
straight up race Wayne, even though like
Mhm.
that could mean going after the American record?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a on the day decision for something like that. Like at the New York Mini, when I had to make a move, either like stay with the Americans or kind of like go with those front three women. I think it's just about how your body feels in that moment, and your body kind of tells you like, yes, you're able to do this today or no. So I wouldn't say I'm necessarily going to like, oh, I'm going to go race Wayne. I'm going for the American record. But if I feel really good on the day, I probably will go because that's just how I am. So but you have to respect the distance. You have to respect the competitors, of course, but I don't think anything's off the table at Houston. If I'm feeling good, I will go for it. But I'm still so new at the half that to me, it's like a PR on the day is success. So that could be sub 68, that could be sub 67. I don't know. We'll have to see.
With just how new you are to it and how low key that race is like it's not something where it's like I feel like there weren't elite bottle stations. It's a half marathon, so it's like it doesn't take a whole lot.
Yeah.
But how's your fueling, I guess, for this half?
Yeah, I just took a couple gels at mile 4, and then at mile 9, it was hilarious. I was struggling so hard to get it down. I was like getting it all over my face, and I couldn't. I just was so I didn't want to take any like food or gel at that point, but I knew that it had some caffeine in it, so I was like, I know this is gonna help me for the next 4 miles. But it was really hard to get that to kind of like get that down at the end because your body is just so in overdrive at that point. Like I don't know how the marathoners do it. I didn't take water at all, which was probably bad of me, but I just didn't want to waste the energy to like grab water. And I was also really cold, so I didn't feel like drinking water. Um, but I just honestly bought a couple of goos from like the store, but I'll probably change up the fueling a little bit for Houston. Um, I do really like the UCAN gels, and they kind of go down a little bit easier because they have so much like of a water base to them. Because that was the problem with the goos is they were really like sticky, and they're just like kind of hard to get down. But the UCAN ones, I'm very familiar with those, and I've taken those during workouts and stuff. So I'll probably use those for Houston, and honestly just take a couple gels throughout the race because I do think it helps. I know some people don't fuel for a half, but like I've seen Kira D'Amato take a gel before a 10K. So like she does that. Like I'm taking a couple of gels during a half. So
That mile 9 gel, I like calling those, well, especially during the marathon, like when you have to do it at like 23 miles and you're like, I'm almost done. Like, why am I doing this? It's like, I
yeah,
call them like the parachute gels because it's like
yeah,
you're just pulling the parachute at that point and like you just got to
yes.
get it done. It's so
Yeah.
tough to get down, but yeah, nothing pleasant about those.
No, I like held on to it because I couldn't get the whole thing down. So I literally held on to that gel for 2 miles. And then finally I just chucked it. I'm like, I got a mile left. I was like, this is not gonna help. I was like, if I can't finish this race like without this gel, then I shouldn't even be here. So I just chucked the gel and I was like, just finish the damn race. You're done. You're done. So
You mentioned before you have the marathon bug without
yeah,
like having run one. The
yeah,
idea, kind of has been brought up by Coach Bell in the past. And
yeah,
anytime like there's someone with a good half marathon, like that's just sort of like the inevitable connection. It's like, oh, well, so what can they do over the full?
yeah.
Where do your sort of like aspirations lie with the full? And then what's a realistic timeline to get there, you think?
Well, I definitely want to make the Olympic team in the marathon in 2028. So that's been on my radar for a little bit. It's funny though, because before I got injured before the half in Valencia, my coach, my coaches and I started toying with the idea of maybe coming back for the full in Valencia just to get a time in, just to see because that was, I think, December 1st of this year, just to see like what a marathon would feel like. But because a lot of my long runs indicated that, I was doing 19-mile long runs pretty quickly. Um, and they just feel pretty natural to me. So it's definitely inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just about which one we go to and what timeline makes sense. Because now, as we approach trying to make a half marathon team, trying to make a 10K team maybe on the track, you kind of have to balance some things. You don't want to overdo it. So the marathon might be pushed off a little bit, but it's definitely on my radar. And I really want I really want to do one sooner rather than later. So, yeah.
It's so it's so interesting how like you eventually essentially have to like reverse engineer like what the next 4 years of your life look
Yeah.
like as soon as one Olympic cycle ends. And it's like I guess we still don't even know like what the status of like the marathon trials is going to be. Like, will there
Yeah.
be one? Where will it be if there is one, and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. But it's like we're just wrapping up December 2024, and it's like you
You
already have
know.
these thoughts.
It's crazy. Like when one cycle ends, another one begins, and you're like, "Yep, shooting for 2028." So everyone says to me now, "You're going to be at LA 2028. Like, got to look out for." And I'm just like, "That's 4 years away, guys. Like, let's calm down."
So in Boone, you're technically at like a little bit of altitude, right?
I think we're at 3,500, 3,800 feet. It's like very moderate elevation, but I will say, like, there is a level of adaptation I think that we get from training here. And I think it allows you to train super hard still without risking kind of like if you're training really hard at 7,000 feet, a lot of times, like a lot of the people that I talk to who live at altitude, they say that they go down like
Mhm.
from elevation for their workouts. But here we can still work out really hard and not be like totally buried from it. Um, but yeah, I kind of enjoy the moderate elevation. I think it works. So yeah,
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
like
ask, like, do you see yourself possibly going to Flag or Boulder or Park
yeah.
City for like a
Mhm.
training period?
I've been wanting to, yeah, I've been toying with the idea. I talked to so many of my running friends and I'm always like, hey, like can I come down? And I know they're all like, yeah, come over here. We want to show you like all the trails and stuff. So I've been toying with the idea. I just have to find a good time to do it because I just don't want to risk, if something's going well, I think altitude is great, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary to like be really good. And so I don't want to give myself too much at once and kind of like burn myself out. But I could definitely see myself doing longer training stints up at probably Flagstaff, or Boulder, something like that. So yeah.
Flagstaff is just like as a New York City kid, like
Yeah.
I've spent like 10 days at Flagstaff, and like that's my max. I'm like
Do you feel different up there?
well, no, it's just the training like and the runs like are never get like that much easier, but
Yeah.
I think it's just sort of like I just need more life around me and like things
Yeah.
open and all that kind of stuff that
Yeah.
it's always a tough adjustment for me to be like, all right, we're going on a work trip and we're going to be in Flag for like 10 days. I'm like, ah, man, like nothing's open past 9 p.m. Not that I'm out
Really?
and about, but I'm
Oh my
like,
God, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
yeah, it's just such a city kid
Yeah.
type thing. All right, final thing
Yeah.
is we've kind of like touched on it. We've got Houston, like the Atlanta half, the 10
Mhm.
world
Yeah.
teams potentially on the horizon. But what are you excited about the most for 2025 after just such a successful 2024?
Yeah. I just think like venturing into new territories, right? Like you said, the half marathon was kind of like the bug for me for the marathon. And I just really enjoy I really enjoy doing new things in terms of like racing that I haven't done before. And I think being able to start thinking about myself being in the equation of making world teams or like running at these longer distances is really exciting. And yeah, I'm excited to see kind of um, where the fitness takes me. And I think a big lesson I've learned along the way after getting kind of two hiccups in my first year of being a pro is like just enjoy the process, honestly, and enjoy the present moment, right? Like that's kind of my main goal is staying healthy and enjoying the process along the way because like things can happen unexpectedly and yeah, I may not like you never know for sure if you're going to be on a start line. So for me, if I do make it to a start line, that's just like a privilege in and of itself. And I think just a lot of times as runners, we kind of take for granted being able to even make it to the start of a race. So for me, I'm just going to focus on the positives of even being able to have that opportunity and just kind of like, I don't know, celebrating the ability to run. So that's kind of where my outlook is for 2025, just enjoying the process along the way.
I love that. Well, Amanda, I appreciate you taking the time for this. I sense a full send in Houston, but we have to get there first, and then hopefully some more special racing happens. But thanks for jumping on
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.